The day Amber called me crying. It was a Tuesday morning. 6:47 a.m. I was sitting at my kitchen table in my apartment in Nashville, Tennessee. Coffee in hand. Watching the sun come up over the city. My city now. The one I had built from nothing. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. And I felt something I had not expected to feel. Not satisfaction. Not anger. Just stillness. Because 3 years earlier, this same woman had stood in my living room, in the house that used to be mine, and looked me directly in the eye and said, "You were never enough for him. That's why he chose me." And honestly, looking at your life, I'm not surprised. Failure follows some people everywhere they go. She said that to me. Those exact words. In my house. While I was still trying to understand how my marriage had ended. And now she was calling me at 6:47 in the morning. Crying. Saying my name like I was the only person left who could help her. I let it ring for a long time. Then I picked up. And I listened to every single word. But before I tell you what she said, you need to understand the full story. Because this story does not start with Amber. It starts with a marriage. And a woman who believed in it completely. My name is Sarah Mitchell. And 6 years ago I was the happiest I thought a person could be. I was 31 years old. Living in a beautiful house in Franklin, Tennessee, a suburb just outside Nashville. Married to David Mitchell for 4 years. We had met at a work conference in Atlanta when I was 26. He was 29. He was charming and funny and had this way of making everyone in a room feel like the most important person there. I fell completely. We dated for 18 months. He proposed on a beach in Savannah, Georgia on a Sunday evening in October. I said yes before he finished the sentence. Our wedding was everything I had dreamed of. 200 guests. A venue outside Franklin with string lights and live music. My mother Patricia crying happy tears in the front row. The first 2 years of our marriage were genuinely good. We bought a house. We traveled. We talked about children, someday, when the timing was right. I was working as a marketing director at a mid-sized healthcare company in Nashville. Good salary. Good title. Work I was proud of. David was a regional sales manager for a tech company. Traveled frequently. But we made it work. Or I thought we were making it work. Looking back now I can see the distance that was growing. The business trips that ran slightly longer than scheduled. The phone that was always face down on the counter. The conversations that got shorter. The way he stopped asking about my day. I noticed all of it. I told myself it was stress. His job was demanding. We were both busy. This was just a phase. I was wrong. It was not a phase. It was Amber. I found out on a Friday evening in March. David was supposed to be in Dallas for a conference. I had come home from work early with a migraine. I was lying on the couch in the dark when my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "You should ask your husband where he actually is tonight." That was all. No name. No explanation. I sat with that text for 20 minutes. Then I called David. He answered on the third ring. He sounded relaxed. Background noise that could have been anything, a hotel bar, a restaurant. He said, "Hey babe. Just finishing up dinner with the team. Everything okay?" I said, "Where are you staying?" He gave me the hotel name without hesitation. I said, "Which hotel?" Same answer. I said, "What's the address?" A half-second pause. Then he gave me an address. I Googled it while he was still talking. The hotel existed. But it was in Nashville. Not Dallas. 12 minutes from our house. I said, "David. Come home." Silence. Then, Sarah. I said, come home right now. He came home 45 minutes later. He walked in the door and I already knew from his face that everything I was afraid of was true. He sat down at the kitchen table. And he told me. Her name was Amber Reeves. She was 28 years old. She worked at his company. It had been going on for 7 months. 7 months. I sat across from him and I listened to every word. And when he finished I said only one thing. Get out of this house tonight. He left. And I sat alone in that kitchen until the sun came up. Trying to figure out who I was now that the life I had built was completely gone. The divorce took 8 months. I will not pretend it was clean or easy. It was brutal in the way that all divorces are brutal, not just legally but personally. Every document signed was another confirmation that something you believed in completely had been a partial fiction. David moved in with Amber almost immediately. My friends, our friends, divided in the way that friends always divide when a marriage ends. Some stayed firmly on my side. My best friend Christine barely left my apartment for the first 2 weeks. Some disappeared entirely, unwilling to choose, which felt like its own kind of choosing. My mother Patricia drove up from Memphis and stayed for 3 weeks. She cooked. She cleaned. She didn't offer advice unless I asked. She was exactly what I needed. David and I had one major point of conflict in the divorce, the house. We had bought it together. Both names on the mortgage. Both of us had contributed financially. I wanted to keep it. Not because I was attached to the building. But because I had designed every room of it. Chosen every piece of furniture. Planted the garden in the backyard. It was mine in a way that had nothing to do with David. His attorney pushed back hard. My attorney, Rebecca Holt, who was sharp and completely unafraid, pushed back harder. In the end I got the house. David got his retirement accounts and walked away with significantly less than he expected. Rebecca told me afterward, you negotiated well. Most people in emotional pain give too much away. You didn't. I had learned from watching David that calm was more powerful than rage. I signed the final papers on a Wednesday morning in November. I drove home. I sat in the garden I had planted. And I allowed myself exactly 1 hour to grieve. Then I went inside. And I started planning what came next. But before I could fully begin, Amber arrived at my door. It was 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. A Saturday afternoon. I was in the middle of repainting the living room, claiming the space, making it mine in a new way, when the doorbell rang. I opened the door. And there was Amber. I had seen photos. I knew what she looked like. Seeing her in person was a different experience. She was younger than I expected somehow. Despite knowing her age. Something about her in person seemed very young. She was holding a small box. She said, I know I'm the last person you want to see. I just wanted to return some things that ended up in David's boxes by mistake. Some of your books. A photo frame. I looked at her. I said, you could have mailed them. She said, I know. I wanted to say something in person. I waited. She said, I'm not going to say I'm sorry because I don't think that means anything at this point. But I want you to know, I didn't plan for this to happen. I took the box. I said, is that all? Something shifted in her expression. And then, I do not know what drove her to say what she said next. Maybe she felt guilty and guilt made her cruel. Maybe she needed to believe I deserved what happened to justify her own choices. Maybe she was simply the kind of person who needed to win even when she had already won. She said, you should know, David told me a lot about your marriage. About you. He said you were cold. Emotionally unavailable. That you cared more about your career than your relationship. Honestly, looking at you standing here alone repainting your house on a Saturday. I believe him. You were never enough for him. That's why he chose me. And honestly, looking at your life, I'm not surprised. Failure follows some people everywhere they go. I stood completely still. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, "Thank you for returning my things." I closed the door. I stood in my half-painted living room, paint roller in my hand. And I made a decision. Not about revenge. About direction. I was going to build something so undeniable that those words would become the most embarrassing thing she ever said. Let me tell you what the next 3 years looked like. Because I want you to understand, I did not sit around waiting for karma. I went to work. Within the first month after the divorce, I made 3 decisions. First, I sold the house. I know. I had fought so hard for it. But after Amber stood in my doorway and said those words, I realized I did not want to live in a space that held that much history. I wanted something entirely new. I sold it for $47,000 more than David and I had paid for it. I took that money and I rented a clean modern apartment in downtown Nashville. Floor-to-ceiling windows. City views. Mine completely. Second decision, I left my job. Not impulsively. Strategically. I had been the marketing director at that healthcare company for 4 years. I was good at it. But I had always had a larger idea that I had kept quietly in the back of my mind. A full-service marketing agency, specifically for women-owned small businesses. Women who had great products and services but no marketing expertise. No brand voice. No digital presence. I had seen this gap for years. I had the skills to fill it. I spent 3 months building the business plan while still at my job. Month 4, I handed in my notice. My boss, Mr. Thomas Garrett, asked if I was sure. I said, "More sure than I've been about anything in years." Third decision, therapy. Twice a week with Dr. Angela Moore in Nashville. I want to say this clearly because I think it matters. Therapy did not make me soft. It made me precise. It helped me understand exactly what I was carrying. The grief, the anger, the specific shame that comes from being publicly left. And process it in a way that fuel rather than poison. By month 6, Mitchell Creative Agency was officially open. 3 clients in the first month. By year 1, 14 clients. By year 2, 31 clients and 4 full-time employees. By year 3, we had been featured in Nashville Business Journal. I had been named in a top 40 under 40 list for Tennessee entrepreneurs. My agency had grown to 8 employees and over 60 active clients. Revenue that I will not state specifically, but that made my former salary feel like a starting point rather than a destination. I was not doing this for Amber. I want to be honest about that. I was doing it because that apartment door closing behind her had clarified something. I had been playing small for years. Fitting myself into a life that was partially someone else's vision. For the first time, I was building entirely my own. I heard things through the years. Not because I was looking. But Nashville is not a small town, but it sometimes feels like one. Christine kept me informed when she thought I needed to know something. Mostly I told her I didn't need updates. But some things filtered through anyway. David and Amber had gotten married 14 months after our divorce was finalized. Small ceremony apparently. Christine heard from a mutual friend who had been invited. She said the wedding was nice but rushed feeling. Within 8 months of the wedding, Amber was pregnant. A daughter. They named her Lily. I heard this and I felt nothing painful. Which surprised me. I thought hearing that would hurt. But the version of me who had wanted children with David felt very far away by then. Like someone I used to know. What I did hear, and this came from multiple sources, was that things between David and Amber were not as smooth as the wedding photos suggested. David's travel schedule had not decreased. If anything, it had increased. A promotion that meant more time away from home. Sound familiar? Christine told me carefully one evening over dinner. I don't want to be the person who says I told you so. But I will say, people don't change the behavior. They just change the person they do it to. I said nothing. I just refilled her wine glass. I did not allow myself to feel satisfied. Because satisfaction would mean I was still watching their life. And I had stopped watching their life a long time ago. I had my own to build. And then. Month 37. A Tuesday morning. 6:47 a.m. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. Amber Mitchell. She had taken his last name. I let it ring 4 times. Then I answered. Her voice was not what I expected. I had imagined if Amber ever called me it would be hostile. Demanding. The same energy she had brought to my doorway 3 years earlier. Instead she sounded broken. She said, Sarah. I know I have no right to call you. I know that. But I don't know who else to call. I said, what's happened? She said, David. I found out 3 weeks ago. There's someone else. At his company. It's been going on for, she says, almost a year. I closed my eyes. Not from shock. From the specific sadness of watching a pattern complete itself. She was crying properly now. She said, I have Lily. She's 2 years old. I have no job. I left my job when she was born. I have no income. The house is in both our names, but his attorney is already. She stopped. Then she said, Sarah. You went through this. You came out the other side. I can see that. Everyone can see what you've built. I need to know how you did it. I need to know there's a way through this. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I said, Amber. Why did you really call me? A long pause. She said, because you're the only person I know who has been exactly where I am right now. And you're the only person I know who is genuinely okay. And I need to know that I can be okay too. I looked out my window at Nashville. My city. My agency with 8 employees 2 miles from where I was sitting. My life, entirely mine. And I thought about what kind of person I wanted to be. Not for Amber. For myself. I want to tell you what I did not do. I did not say, you deserve this. I did not remind her of what she had said to me at my door 3 years earlier. I did not use her pain as a mirror to admire my own success. Because that is not who I am. And honestly, it is not who I wanted to become. What I did was this. I said, Amber. I'm going to give you 1 hour. Come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m. I will give you the name of my attorney, Rebecca Holt. She is the best family law attorney in Nashville, and she will protect you and Lily. I will tell you the 3 decisions I made in the first month that changed everything. And I will tell you one thing that took me a long time to understand about what comes next. She was quiet. Then she said, why would you help me? I said, because you have a 2-year-old daughter who needs her mother to be okay. And because I remember exactly what it feels like to sit in a house that used to be yours and not know how to take the first step. And because the version of me that Amber Reeves called a failure 3 years ago would have told you to figure it out yourself. But I'm not her anymore. Amber came to my office the next morning. She was pale. Exhausted. Clutching a coffee cup like it was the only solid thing left. I gave her Rebecca's number. I told her the 3 decisions: sell what's holding you in the past, build something of your own, get the right professional support. And then I told her the one thing. I said, the thing that took me the longest to understand is this. David leaving was not a verdict on your worth. It was information about his character. Those are 2 completely different things. And the sooner you separate them in your mind, the sooner you can start building something that actually belongs to you. Amber hired Rebecca. the divorce settled 7 months later. She got the house, primary custody of Lily, and enough financial support to give herself 2 years to rebuild. I heard through Christine that she had gone back to school, finishing a degree she had left incomplete when she met David. We are not friends. I want to be honest about that. What happened between us is not something that becomes a friendship. But we are something. Proof maybe that people are more complicated than the worst thing they ever said. That grace is not the same as forgetting. That you can help someone who hurt you without pretending they didn't. As for David, I have not spoken to him since the divorce papers were signed. I do not need to. His chapter in my story ended a long time ago. The chapter 1 I'm living now has nothing to do with him. Mitchell Creative Agency has 12 employees now. We were named one of the top independent marketing agencies in Tennessee last spring. I mentor 3 young women entrepreneurs through a program I started 6 months ago. I live in an apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Nashville that still makes me stop sometimes. Just stop and look. And think. Failure follows some people everywhere they go. She was right about that. She just got the wrong person. Failure followed David. And I followed the light.